Peter Hitchens is here, though, columnist at the Mail on Sunday. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
We are stuck once again in a sort of doom loop, it would appear. Nobody seems to know what to do about the migrant hotels. I know we're going to get on to some other subjects, but what's your initial thoughts about these court cases that are going on?
Well, it's all about things which have happened long ago. We've already sustained an enormous increase in migration, legal and illegal, and it's happened. And Kemi Badenoch, for instance, going on about how Tory council should do something about migrant hotels. Well, what was the Tory party doing about them when they were in power?
Well, they were grabbing more and more of them and putting more and more people in them.
And there's a sort of futility about this that makes me quite cross, that everybody's arguing about it now. The whole issue of mass migration into this country is something in the region of 20 years old now. Back in you probably remember when Migration Watch was established.
Yeah.
Sir Andrew Green constantly warning about the enormous amounts of housing which were going to be needed, the great settlements the size of cities which would be needed to actually house the people who were coming in there. This is now happening, and to some extent has happened, and it's very, very difficult to reverse. In fact, I would have thought impossible. If you grasp in the mind to try and think of something that might actually effectively halt this extraordinary flow of people across the Channel and indeed across the Mediterranean. What happened there was nothing physically changed, except that in Libya we overthrew Colonel Gaddafi, who was stopping people coming across the Mediterranean. Probably the maddest action of any British government in the history of the world, one for which David Cameron has never fully either taken responsibility or been properly blamed. The man should not even be allowed back in public life, not just for the damage that he did to this country, but the damage he did to Europe as a whole by doing that. The Libya war was unbelievably foolish. But these things have to be thought, and people looking at that might look again at the extraordinary habit of British governments of plunging themselves into wars they don't understand over and over again, and causing actually quite predictable bad consequences by doing so. Why do we keep doing this? That would be worth thinking about. I rack my brains for what you might do about the actual south coast of this country, where again what happened was that people realized that you could simply cross the water. It was a psychological barrier in people's minds. They thought you couldn't. And once people discovered that you can do it, then what we have effectively is an unfenced land border with France. And if you go down there, as I did, the invitation of a friend of mine who keeps me abreast of events down there near Dungeness, the extraordinary feeling you have on the southern coast of England is of an open door, which to me is very strange, because I used to live down near Portsmouth on the coast, and would go down as a child to the coast and feel incredibly safe to see the sea there between us and any threat, and that feeling of safety has now gone. What do you do? The most outrageous suggestion which has crossed my mind is that we start treating it as a land border and try and find some way of building an actual fence in the sea. You'll notice that the Poles, who are getting a lot of migration pushed towards them through Belarus, have begun building very effective modern fencing simply to stop it. And I don't know. Even if you've stopped it all now, an awful lot of the damage will already have been done. And that's what really perplexes me, that we now have the situation of a country which has a very large new population, which we cannot, as civilized people, do anything other than try to integrate. But integration can't really begin unless the enormous migration stops.
Yes.
Because integration happens. Integration can't happen when an enormous amount of migration is still going on. It's you can only do it when the numbers are controlled and people have time to get used to each other and the country has time to absorb. None of that's being thought about, and I hear absolutely nothing of that kind in the national debate, and it's frustrating and dispiriting.
No, but surprisingly, and I wasn't expecting this to come from Bridget Phillipson, to be honest, on the front page of the Telegraph today, she's talking about how appalled she is at the English and maths standards of white working class pupils in our schools. And one of the reasons why I would suggest to you that the white working class pupils in our schools are underperforming is because there's been such an emphasis on everybody else some of whom may have come into the country from elsewhere, who are given sort of more attention, if you like.
This is a very complicated subject, and we haven't time this morning to go into it, particularly the fascinating question of the London effect, where the state schools appear to be doing better. I think there may be other explanations for it. What I would say is about Miss Phillipson is that I'm glad she's noticed. She is, I think, more of an old-fashioned left-winger than a London politically correct person. If she is serious about looking at this, then why doesn't she re-examine her own party's policy of the past 60 years of destroying good schools which are available to the children of the poor and forcing people to pay money, either through house prices or through fees, to get a decent education, which is the situation of most people. If she really is serious about helping, there used to be a tradition in the Labour Party of such people. If she is really serious about helping those white working class children to achieve, then she needs to go to her leader and say, it's time we went back to selective state grammar schools of the sort which they have all over, particularly the German-speaking parts of Europe, where working-class children do well. In the days when we had state grammar schools, 63% of the pupils in them were from the working class. And these were the best schools in the country. And you simply cannot imagine now in Britain being able to say that 63% of the pupils in the best schools in the country are from the working class, because they won't be. If she really means it, then that's something she can do, and she can put up a fight about it. But does she really mean it, or is she just saying it because she's ambitious? I don't know, but hold her to her word is my advice.
Yes. I mean, there's an interesting thing going on in the country at the moment, it seems to me. There's a lot of reflection, which is always good, I think. You know, we've seen, obviously, the migrant hotels policy changing before our very eyes, possibly. But we've also seen... I think the awakening, to some extent, of an awful lot of people's patriotism, for want of a better phrase. You've written about it today in the Mail, about the flags that are going up and the flags that are being taken down, council workers, you know, Jobsworths being, you know, what they do best, which is just annoying people, and just ordinary people going, do you know what, I wasn't feeling like this last week, but now, actually, I'm going to put a flag out.
I know. I'm afraid that the people get more concerned about the national flags when they feel more insecure. It's something you easily demonstrated to anybody if you want to make a visit to Northern Ireland, where Britishness is very much under threat, and therefore you'll find that those people who regard themselves as British fly the Union Jack, and indeed paint their curbstones in red, white, and blue.
I found that amazing when I saw that for the first time.
Classic way, which would seem very odd or would have seemed very odd in this country until very recently. I think now the increasing flying of the flag, whether it be the Union Jack or the St. George's Cross, is a response to the multiculturalization and destabilization of this country by a liberal elite which doesn't respect this country's history or have any liking for it. And it's not, I mean, I can completely understand why people do it. I also know, just as you do, why local authorities, which have been one of the main bodies taken over by the Euro-communist movement, are so anxious to fight against it when it happens. But I think that it's not necessarily a good sign if a country starts needing to emphasize its national heritage. When I was growing up in this country in the 1950s, you hardly saw flags flying at all. And you'll remember in 1966 at the World Cup, when it was an England team, but most of the people in the stadium waving flags were waving Union Jacks, not St. George's Crosses, because this issue of England being different from Britain had also not arisen. But now, since the Blairites broke up the country and created a semi-independent Scotland and Wales, that's become an issue too. So while I would never decry anybody rejoicing in their national past and heritage, I think that it's not necessarily a good sign for the future of this country that people feel a stronger need to do so.
Yeah. Well, the trouble is, isn't it? As ever, you get people like you've written about him. I mentioned him. We were doing Plank of the Week yesterday. This guy Cahind Andrews, who was on morning television this week, decrying the fact that the St George's Cross flag is problematic. It's racist. It's all about the worst things of the British Empire. He said it was an insult to his forebears and his ancestors in parts of the Caribbean where he came from and Africa. And you get this ludicrously polarised debate about a piece of cloth, effectively, which shouldn't be that important.
Well, yes, but it is important because ultimately the history of flags is the history of battle and of defending or extending the power of your country, which people do. The problem with empires. The most fundamental problem with empires is that if you don't have one, then there's grave danger you're becoming part of someone else's.
Yes.
And that ultimately is the choice for nations. If you don't, it's quite difficult for people to decide just to leave you alone and for you to manage to stay on your own and be independent. Even once this country had come out of the European Union, people suddenly discovered just how many international agreements and treaties prevented the government from doing all kinds of things which we would otherwise have wanted it to do. True independence is really only possible these days for superpowers, and as the United States and China demonstrate, they can do pretty much what they want to do, both at home and abroad. We can't, and it's nobody could ever say that the British Empire was perfect or a wonderful institution or that everything that it did was good, because it simply wouldn't be true. On the other hand, a lot of what it did do was good, and compared with some other empires, just ask yourself a simple question: would you rather be ruled by the British Empire or the Russian Empire? And the answer comes back pretty quickly. There is a difference between empires. People just need to distinguish on this subject a bit. I don't mind people complaining about the bad things the British Empire did. I think it's right that we should be aware that we weren't always totally perfect, and we aren't now. But that doesn't mean that this country should be dissolved and cease to exist.
Well, no. I mean, one of the things that...
What a lot of people would like to see, I'm afraid.
Well, one of the things that I found very sort of fascinating and sort of pressing was during the whole debate in 2019 about the European Union. And when you would go down to Westminster, there would be these ridiculous demonstrations going on. And on the one side of the aisle were all the people waving European flags, which they seemed to think was a flag of a country, when it actually wasn't. It was the flag of a sort of composite, idea that was the European Union. And then on the other side, you'd have people waving the Union Jack. And it became, the EU flag suddenly became a big thing, didn't it?
Well, it does represent a different way of running countries in the world to ours. And that's what a lot of left-wing people in this country like about it.
Yeah.
They don't really like the ancient systems of this country. The sovereignty of our elected parliament is something they particularly dislike and want to get rid of, and they don't like the fact that because we've been separate from the European continent for so many centuries, we have different types of law and different attitudes towards all kinds of other things. They would much prefer this country to be more like France or the Netherlands and less like Britain. That's been the great struggle. One of the reasons why we've had so much migration into this country, in my view, is because left-wing people reckon that large-scale migration will change the country irrevocably into somewhere else. That has been at the heart of an awful lot of it. The left-wingers don't particularly like the migrants who arrive, and I'm not saying they hate them or anything like that, but they don't particularly like them as such. But what they really do dislike is Britain as it used to be, and they see large-scale migration as a way of changing it, and I don't have very much doubt about that. And I keep coming back to this amazing, the tiny lifting of the curtain for a moment on what Labour really thought about this, as opposed to what they said. The extraordinary Andrew Neither article in the Evening Standard, in which he said that he detected a desire to change the country permanently and make it multicultural. That is the only time it's ever been openly said, but that doesn't mean it's the only time it's ever been inwardly thought.
No, exactly right. Peter, good to see you. We're running out of time, unfortunately, so we'll talk again soon. Peter Hitchens, columnist at the Mail on Sunday.